Hi, good evening and welcome. This is the 301st meeting of the New York Comics and Picture Stories Symposium. That's a weekly lecture series about comics, illustration, animation, and the history of text image work. We're sponsored these days in part by the Will and Ann Eisner Family Foundation. And our guest tonight, up in that the box up there, is Masha Krasnova Shabaeva. Is that okay?
Hi.
Hi. She
Yes.
was born in Russia and is currently based in Rotterdam in the Netherlands. She's been working as a commercial illustrator since 2004 for clients around the world, including the New York Times, Condé Nast Traveler, Vrij Nederland, Esquire, Elle, GQ, Rolling Stone, and many others. And she's represented by the Heart Agency worldwide. But besides her illustration work, she's been involved in self-initiated art projects for museums and galleries, as well as self-publishing. She's exhibited in Rotterdam, in Uppsala Kunstmuseum, in Rotopol, Kassel, Germany, and other venues. And she teaches at the Artes Academy in Zwolle and the Willem de Kooning Academy in Rotterdam. And her talk tonight is entitled Still on My Way to Somewhere. So here's Masha.
Yes.
I'm going to make you the spotlight.
So you already told everything. Now I will have to repeat.
Well, I gave the short version. You can give you can do the long version.
So then I will just start sharing, I guess.
Sure.
Yes, my name is pretty complicated, I guess, but I'm used to it, kind of. My name is Masha Krasnova Shabaeva, and I was born and lived in Russia until 10 years ago. I moved to the Netherlands. And as Ben already told you, I work as an illustrator and I call myself visual artist and illustrator. I also teach at Willem de Kooning Academy in Rotterdam. And recently I got involved in something completely new for me. Illustration department where I'm employed asked my colleague Rachel Sander on the right here and me to do a research of illustration field for the faculty. It is such an exciting and inspiring process for me. We've been talking to a lot of people while doing this research. Our favorite question to ask different professionals working in illustration and with illustrators: how would you define illustration? Obviously, we are not hoping to find one answer to this question. However, we are amazed by the diversity of the answers we get. For me, it's even more interesting to be involved in this research because for many years, I've been confused about my place in the art world and how to call myself exactly. So we start with Ufa. I'm 39, so actually I was born in the times when it was still the USSR. And many people here in the Netherlands look at my face and my name and assume that I'm Russian or Polish sometimes, but it's more complicated than that. I grew up in Ufa. It's a city. It's a capital of Republic of Bashkortostan. It's situated around 1,100 kilometers from Moscow or 700 miles from Moscow. And it's ethnic republic inside of Russia. Historically, it was a Russian colony. My late father was Russian. My mother in the center here with hugging me is half Bashkir, half Tatar. Those are two Turkic ethnic groups. So I was a bilingual child, and I used to repeat verses from Quran before going to sleep. My grandmother on the right, she was a true communist, but also secretly a very religious person, taught me to do this. And also she was teaching me Arabic too. So, and here on the left is my grandma in traditional Tatar clothing. So I don't regret moving away, but I regret losing the language and the culture that I was raised in. And I grew up in a very artistic family. Both my mother and my grandmother were journalists in local newspapers. And my father was a painter. His name is Masha Krasnova. And it was, I realized that it was a privilege to grow up in a family like that. The atmosphere at home was very creative, but I've also had access to the books, and books were in deficit. The information about the culture and the world around USSR, around Bashkortostan, was also kind of limited, and Ufa was quite culturally isolated. So many of my influences were very local. However, my parents had a vast collection of Western books, which were smuggled by their friends and acquaintances from the West. Among them were books by Hieronymus Bosch and Francisco Goya, for example, and I loved looking through them when I was a child. My love for self-publishing and samizdat is connected to my parents too. They had many samizdat publications in their collection. I remember I saw the legendary Aya magazine for the first time in my father's studio, and I was truly impressed by it. In 1980s, they prepared all the material for this magazine in the USSR and then smuggled it to Paris to publish there. That is why the quality of the print was pretty high for Russian samizdat, for Soviet samizdat. And it was about underground Russian art. And I can say that I was influenced by comic books, but I lived in a parallel reality. So, of course, I didn't see any Western books or graphic novels until I was already grown up. And of course, we had Russian comic strips for children, for example, in Murzilka magazine. But also very exotic influence, kind of. Not many people know him, I guess. But he was one of the strongest impressions. I had this gigantic book of Danish communist cartoonist Herluf Bidstrup. It was published in the USSR. He was a communist, so he was well known, loved, and published, allowed to be published in the USSR. So I guess it was like my Soviet Marvel or something like this, Soviet communistic Marvel. When I was a teenager, already a collective of comic artists under the leadership of Vitaly Muhamedyanov started to publish a magazine on Ufa called Muha, which is translated as fly. It was really popular among teenagers especially, and every issue was an anthology of comic strips. And I think it was inspired by the American magazine Heavy Metal. It was very bold, kitschy, provocative, an epitome of what is considered bad taste. But I was really impressed by it. Also because I've never seen anything like this before. By the way, I really recommend checking out Uno Morales. He's one of the most interesting artists in Russia today. And he started as a young man in Muha. So he's also from Ufa. Talking about local cultural influences, I knew a lot about local art scene. Obviously, I constantly went to the shows with my dad. And I think one of the most vivid memories for me would be the paintings by Tatar painter Adia Sidikova. And I think that the most influential and impressive thing for me in terms of images were the school textbooks and the Soviet children's books. I still love how uncanny and minimal they are. I could look at these images for hours, and I think I still secretly want to be like those illustrators. So obviously I was mesmerized by images since I was a child, and I was constantly drawing, but I didn't have any particular desire to become an artist. And I also didn't think that I have any talent for this. But eventually my father's example overpowered all other choices, and I've started studying painting in the local College of Fine Arts. And back in 2000s, the system of art education was really outdated. And I think it still is. I think in my College of Arts, it's like the same situation today with education. So I just drew a lot of Greek sculptures, still lifes, nude models, things like this, in a very classical technique, like on this image that I found on internet. Unfortunately, I don't know the author, but in this kind of drawing, it doesn't really matter, I guess. So not so much time and attention is given to our development as an artist with original vision. So they teach you how, but they don't dive into what really you want to draw. However, I was lucky, and I think I had quite forward-thinking teachers. Still, this education is very heavy, and it was very heavy on restrictions of different kinds. And I think it took me years to get rid of those restrictions in my head. Moscow. I've got into illustration by an accident. When I graduated from the college, I wanted to continue my career as a painter, but a few months later, I moved to Moscow rather unexpectedly. Unexpectedly because I moved with my boyfriend. He went there to study. And it's a very weird story because we had to get married to live in a dorm because we couldn't afford another type of housing. But it was very strict, so only wives could be living in this dorm. So I had to marry to go there with him. And I was like 23, so it's a very weird story for me now. So I still wanted to move, and I would eventually move anyway, because I didn't see any future for myself in my hometown. However, I was quite distressed when I actually did it. I just couldn't imagine where I can find any work. And I didn't know a lot of people in this city. So somehow I had this stack of magazines, Russian magazines that I really liked to read. And I just decided to send my images to these magazines. I don't know why I decided to do that, but I thought that maybe it will work. Of course, I didn't expect anything. So I just checked the emails on the covers, on the back of the covers, and just sent my images. And I was very lucky because I got my first job in a day or two after I submitted those images. So I just started to work as an illustrator in Moscow. And I don't have a lot of work from that time. I was mostly doing paintings, but I also played with digital media a bit. So this is the only image that I could find. So by pure chance, I started earning money by making illustrations. And I didn't feel like I'm a commercial illustrator. I didn't know anything about illustration. But I also was really lucky to get clients who understood my struggle, and they let me experiment and grow somehow into this profession. And I was really grateful for this opportunity. I worked with these 3 magazines a lot. This is Большой город, also Afisha, and later with Russian Esquire. 2 of those magazines don't exist anymore. They were all quite brave and experimental. And I think, I'm not sure, but I think Большой город was really inspired by the New Yorker. At least the concept of using a lot of illustration in every issue, I think, comes from there. I didn't really think about my style. I didn't know that I should have a particular style in illustration. So I tried a lot of techniques and approaches. And we collaborated with my new husband, Timur Shabaeva, a lot. He's an architect. So in some illustrations, I don't even remember who did what. Like in this illustration, I don't remember which part is his and which part is mine. But also the ADs asked us to do a lot of different things. In many cases, the style wasn't that important. For example, we worked together quite often on creating decorations, objects out of paper for photo shoots. So on the left, you see me drawing kind of decoration for the photo shoot, but I couldn't find the final result. So I think there was this guy, he was lying here and pretending to be in this interior or something like this. And this guy who is looking at me, it's just a driver. And on the right, those are the paper objects, cardboard objects that we did for the photo shoots. And unfortunately, I grew up in a very classical hierarchy, as I already told you, where illustration was considered a lower applied art form, especially illustrations for magazines, advertising. It's commercial, you do it for the money, it's not sophisticated enough. Often it's reproduced, so it's not unique. It doesn't have as much value as true art, autonomous art. And I assume that situation in the US is better in this sense, but in Russia, in the Netherlands, I can still feel this prejudice. And I remember many Russian artists being proud that they are not commercial and living in this ideal of autonomous artists, standing a little bit above all other people. So I was educated in this spirit, and I've internalized this impossible and I think toxic ideal, and didn't appreciate being an illustrator at all. So I thought that I'm doing it only for the money and I have to eventually grow and become a real artist. So I had this inner conflict constantly. I still did a lot of kind of self-initiated independent projects besides illustration. And in my mid-20s, I went to a postgraduate course to study contemporary art. The institution is called ICA Moscow. And I think that majority of younger, well-known artists in Russia, they went through this course. I actually studied together with Victoria Lamasco, who was a speaker here in January. If you haven't seen her book, Other Russias, yet you have to see it and read it. It's really interesting. So I've experimented a lot, made very bad installations. In 2000s, also painting, drawing had a low moment in fine arts in Russia, at least, kind of bad rap. I also think that it was an answer to the classical art education, which still prevailed. But as the result of this course, I realized that I still wanted to draw and nothing else. We had our classes in the studios that were occupied by Moscow conceptualists in 1970s. Ilya Kabakov, Eric Bulatov, Viktor Pivovarov, among others. They earned money working as illustrators in children's magazines and books. And in their free time, they were making underground art, which made them famous not only in Russia, but all over the world. And most importantly, they were all drawing or working with images. Being reminded that they existed and seeing how similar my situation is really inspired me to go back to drawing and painting. And gradually, I've begun to realize that it's possible to be a commercial illustrator and also an autonomous artist, and there is nothing weird about it. I should say that after I moved to the Netherlands, my visual style changed significantly. Maybe it's because I started to study a new language and culture, but sometimes it seems that your art can change only because you move to another place. Some of the influences you can feel, but it's very difficult to explain them and analyze them. For example, I think that Dutch landscape, cities, homes are very different from Russians, and this only fact has influenced somehow my drawings. So I still painted and drew like this, my own personal work. But I still searched for the right medium to tell my stories. And I think this process started to crystallize into something real shortly after I moved to the Netherlands. Books, zines, and animation were the two media that I felt could help me achieve the effect that I wanted to achieve. I like the freedom that those two genres give me. And I think that because of this influence, I started to fluctuate to digital medium more. And the second reason, out of necessity, I started to do more digital work. My kids were born in the Netherlands, and even now, when they're a bit older, but still young, I still have to use digital just to save time. I still consider myself a beginner at animation. My first two shorts, The Lake and The Classroom, were rather an experiment, an attempt to translate my stories into this new medium. And both videos were made again in collaboration with Timur. Here he helped me a lot with animation process and sound. And our approach to making of the sound was a kind of amateurish, but we also kind of liked it, that we liked that we did it that way. For The Lake, we just went to the forest, to the local forest in Rotterdam, and recorded the sounds using dictaphone. Oh. And for The Classroom, for The Classroom, I used a fragment of a song from my home country. It's a song in Bashkir language, but you can barely hear it actually. Besides, I recorded some sounds with the phone. I don't know if you hear the sounds, but maybe you do. Water flowing, singing, etc. And we built everything up after the visual part was ready. And actually, I did these 2 videos for the gallery, but then the show didn't happen. So I showed it at Boijmans Museum in Rotterdam. And then they kind of have their own life without me really. I'm not involved in what those 2 videos do, because I regularly got invited to the festivals, animation festivals, and even get paid for showing these videos. So it's very repetitive, because it was like the main idea was that those videos will be showed on a loop. It's kind of video art. I would love to continue my experiments in animation, but I couldn't find time to get back to it since in 2013, I've had my daughter. I only did very small things then. Since then, flip books and GIFs. And animation is quite a time-consuming process, as you might know, but I still hope that I'll get back to it someday. I've discovered self-publishing as an art form in the Netherlands. It was already very popular here at that time, but in Russia it was still not. As I've already mentioned, I was always mesmerized by books and picture books, and my first self-published zines were exploring very trivial formats, coloring book, pop-up book, but I also perceived them as deconstructed graphic novels. So this one is from Untitled 1, the bigger zine on the left, and this is the coloring book on the right. So the coloring book had colored pages and the pages that you could color yourself. And this is a pop-up book. Recently, for our research, we talked with Jose Quintanar, a talented artist and illustrator currently based in Rotterdam, but soon he will move back to Spain, I think, about books and self-publishing. And he said something in the lines that a self-published book or zine is one of the most democratic ways for an artist to show their work. I completely agree with this statement. And I really like the fact that it makes my work kind of less individualistic, that I can share it for and not ask a lot in return. Moving to the Netherlands was a shock to my system. People were interested in what I do, so I once again consider myself lucky. But they would tell me that my style is not commercial enough and that I should try to change it or try to work with the galleries, and then galleries were not super interested in what I do, and no one would work with me. I still worked sometimes for Russian magazines and did things like this. For a Fisher magazine, it's about Nizhny Novgorod. It was kind of a story about the city, and they just asked me to make illustrations. But for the Dutch market, they were too weird, this kind of illustrations, and I think still is. Because also the Dutch market is very small. So not many opportunities, not a lot of place for weirdness. And I've started to work occasionally in the US and other European countries, Italy, for example. This one is for Condé Nast Traveler US edition. 10 years later, a lot has changed in the Netherlands, of course, though I still mostly get work as an autonomous artist in the Netherlands and do commercial projects in other countries. Sometimes I get commission here, which merge more autonomous approach with illustration. This one I did last year, or yes, last year for Zeus Museum in Middelburg. And those wooden objects in this exhibition are by me. So I had to tell the story of Jan de Prendenknieper, 19th century, very poor, very unhappy, but very kind of talented artist who did these cutouts, very traditional cutouts. But he did it in his own manner, which really reminded me of avant-garde, Russian avant-garde kind of. They were really ahead of his time. So I just had to make these objects that illustrate his life. But it seems that illustration as an art form is expanding in the Netherlands. And I'm really excited about that, because for me, the blurrier the lines between the genres, the better. So I'm really happy when I see the lines getting erased between like autonomous commercial illustration, painting, sculpture. So if you want to see a lot of autonomous illustrators and artists drawing and having fun, I really recommend you to look at the Dutch Riso-printed magazine Wobby. I'm a big fan of them and I participate in their projects regularly. The editor-in-chief, Marjolein Schalk, she's also an illustrator. I think she does a really great job helping young Dutch illustrators because she's just, yeah, she thinks that it's her mission to find new talent and to help them somehow to go further and to support them. These years in the Netherlands were tough for me work-wise and financially. Of course, as an artist, you are never sure what will come next. And there were moments when I honestly thought that I should have chosen another profession, because it seems to me that being an artist is not really compatible with having children. And I believe just thinking about my zines and books and drawing them in the night when the kids are asleep really saved me mentally. And I think that I'm partly obsessed with drawing just because the process of drawing is very therapeutic for me. With The Strangers, my idea was to create a world inhabited by women. My main inspiration here was Herland, a novel by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. And when I was making a PDF of the zine for print, I've realized that this book is exactly about my situation. Just about me drawing, creating in the dark, and trying to survive as an artist. The zine was published in 2018 by Print Room, but I made it a bit earlier. A lot of images were made in 2013 and 2014. I've been working for many years with Print Room. They really supported me through the most difficult times. And if you visit Rotterdam when it will be possible, I really recommend coming to Print Room. They collect books, they publish books. It's a very interesting place. Now I'm also trying to research Soviet samizdat and the history of self-publishing on my free time as a hobby. And I started to collect books and publications myself. I'm really impressed by what's going on in Russia now in self-publishing. This new movement deserves, I think, a separate talk. And I think that illustration and graphic art have always had a very powerful, revolutionary, activist potential. And I really love that. And I think self-publishing now in Russia is a good example of this activist energy too. I feel that by now I've lived a lot of lives as an artist. I've had my Russian career. Now I live in the Netherlands, and almost all my projects are outside of Russia. And my style and approach, of course, changed significantly and many times during this time. I even tried to become a children's book author once. My book was published by Russian publisher Samokat in 2019. And when I was preparing this presentation, I was really shocked that it was published in 2019 because because of COVID, it seems like 5 years has passed since it was published. So I really experimented with my style here. I've created sort of an alter ego style-wise for this book. And eventually I've understood that it's not really my thing, but I kind of used some of the discoveries, stylistic discoveries I've integrated them into my artistic routine. And only in recent years, I was able to find a manner that I'm completely comfortable with, but there were always several core elements and themes in my work, which all grow from my childhood. Perhaps sometimes you can see Bosque in there, sometimes it looks like a school book illustration. I'm not living in the past. I'm not really a nostalgic person. I've had a lot of influences that I've encountered late in my life, but it's nice for me to know what the roots are of what I do. I've been always fascinated by architecture and architectural drawings. I don't know if it comes from my father's paintings. On the left is one of his paintings, or the place I grew up with all the chemical plants and industrial landscapes. Actually, my whole life, I've had these recurring dreams where I walk through unknown landscapes and cities. I really like those dreams. So architecture is important to me. It's important to create a landscape, an atmosphere for my characters to exist in. And as a commercial artist, I worked with architectural bureaus quite often too, and I really enjoy doing it. This one is for Star Architects Bureau from Rotterdam. It was their project for Paris of renovation of old buildings in Paris. Once there was a clear line between my art and commercial work in terms of style and technique, and I spent years on bringing these two parts together. I wanted to be whole as an artist, to erase this line, this difference. Somehow it was important for me to do. I really wanted to create this flexible manner that would merge several different visual languages, so I could experiment inside of it endlessly, preferably. And I'm still moving towards this goal. I always gravitated towards simplicity in terms of technique. My sketches are often more complicated than the result. I simplify a lot while working on the image. Line is very important to me. Color is secondary. I don't really think about it a lot. I just try not to use too many colors in one image. I don't like very static, comfortable images, so I always try to find some kind of imbalance in the composition to make it more dynamic. There is a movement in my images, but sometimes nobody is walking or running. I just try to achieve the effect of floating. It's like a mirage, and if you blink it's supposed to disappear, kind of. I'm still calling myself visual artist and illustrator, but to be honest, I would rather call myself an illustrator who does self-initiated projects and commercial art, or something like this. I still think that commercial work is different type of work for me than what I do autonomously, but not because it's not true art or whatever I thought when I was in my 20s. The first and very important difference is commercial work is about collaboration for me. I can never take full credit for the work I do for a client or publication or an art director. And sometimes the image doesn't work only because you have this miscommunication with the client. And second difference, and the main difficulty for me, I'm still learning to overcome it. My narrative stories are an essential part of my work and visual style. So I often have to make a huge effort not to lose myself while illustrating another person's text or idea. I hope I formulated it clearly. So sometimes I get lost in this text by a different person. I cannot see myself in the illustration I've made, and I just try to let it go. But sometimes it works and it makes me happy. So overall, I like challenges when I do commercial work, and I feel like I'm still learning to do it right, learning to be an illustrator. So what is illustration for me? First of all, I'm really happy that I don't care about being autonomous, commercial anymore. And I think if we stop focusing on this old-fashioned hierarchies and romantic unachievable ideas of independency of an artist, then looking back, we will see that illustration has always been something more important and meaningful than we thought about it. For me, illustration is this mysterious territory between words and images. And I think it's essential to take it seriously and to explore it. It is important for the illustrators to dig deeper into the history of illustration, not just history of fine art. Because in the Netherlands, we sometimes have a problem with it at the academies, that the students learn only history of art, not of illustration. And it is important not to discard art forms only because they seem primitive, silly, not sophisticated enough to analyze. I think we all should accept that illustration is important and should be respected. Thank you. And I didn't put a lot of images into this presentation. So if you are interested, you can also visit my website. You can see more images there.
Thank you. Yeah, if you have if you have any questions or comments, you can just put your name in the chat, and you can unmute yourself. Yeah, it seems a lot. It's sort of like your realization about the world of art all happened during the Russian Revolution. People said easel painting is just finished, and they wanted to make posters and all kinds of popular prints. So maybe you're just reliving this revolution.
Yes. Well,
really,
I think I was studying, learning to be an artist in a very transitional period of time.
Yeah.
Like there was no Soviet Union, but we still had this remnants of Soviet ideology and Soviet view on art everywhere. So it was really difficult to find yourself. And I think I'm not the only artist who had this kind of problems. I think my generation of artists, they all have this similar problems.
Right.
Can you discuss more about your technique from a technical perspective? Thank you, Margarita. Well, my technique became as simple as possible due also to necessity, because I don't have much time with 2 kids, unfortunately, to do paintings or anything like this. So I just decided that the main thing for me is to draw, and I should try and find ways that will let me do it quicker, and I won't have to spend a lot of time on these images. So this is essentially my technical perspective. But I hope I will return to painting, or to something more, to something slower, let's say. Zines are a great format. I was actively publishing them in the 90s, and I'm working on getting that going again. Yeah, I think that's, yeah, I mean, you should do it again. What can I say?
A question from Diane Tucker.
Hi, thanks. Sorry, I was just typing it in case you were reading, but thank you very much. You seem to have a really interesting, by the way, thank you for showing this very interesting work and giving us exposure not only to what you're doing, but the range of things that you've been seeing and have influenced you, because it's very, very rich. I know you have certain visual tropes, like the double figure, and some others. I wonder, have you set up a sort of explicit symbolic vocabulary, like you mean to be saying something in particular when you use certain tropes, or is that, would you say it's much less explicit? I mean, I wonder how that all kind of works. If you can, and maybe it's so unconscious that you're not, it's hard to talk about. I don't know. Do you understand my question, or have I also been too vague?
Yes. I think my work is very intuitive. So sometimes I do something without realizing why I'm attracted to this imagery. But later I discovered that there were kind of, I can draw these parallels with my life and my drawings. So they are not like 100% biographical, but they are very influenced by my life experiences. And sometimes, sometimes I just prefer not to dive too deep into some of the tropes I like. But I also, when I had therapy, I also had a therapy kind of sketchbook. And I really like to draw these raw emotions and just images that come out there. I don't use them like that, like straight away in my work, because my work is still more calculated than this. It's not a therapy, but yeah, sometimes I just use the images that come out just very emotionally from me. So in some of my work, I can see these parallels. I can explain some things, but in some of them I just prefer not to do that.
So for example, the double figure, which you use, I mean, there was always, in the classroom, for example, the sort of twin, sort of people coming together. And I saw even that notion was carried to the end in one of your last images. I think the one in the park, the one that Ben had used as kind of the pamphlet for announcing this, also that you see that double image. And I mean, I've also sort of noted you as being kind of a person who's in some ways doubled or split in terms of, simultaneously you're having, it would have been hard enough to sort of like, I mean, you're dealing with complex ideas about, and hierarchies about the self, the commercial versus, versus, you know, fine and so on. I mean, I don't know if you sort of view that as an image of you in terms of your sort of being split in multiple different ways, and I don't know.
Yeah, maybe it's, I think it's partly this, it's partly about me as an artist, but also it's something, yeah, maybe it's something about when I was a child, kind of this, how to explain this? At school, everyone was supposed to be similar, kind of. We had these uniforms, and we all seemed very alike, let's say. So I think from these uniforms, it came this image that of these similar girls that look almost the same. But also, yeah, I am split in terms of like my art. I was, at least. Maybe now I will draw less of these girls, you know.
No, it's, I mean, I didn't mean to encourage or discourage. It's just very interesting. Thank you so
much.
much.
Yeah, thank you. Christopher, hi, Christopher. I know you.
A question from David Berger.
Oh, yeah, David.
I'd like to hear their voice.
Do you want to read it? Or?
Oh, you can unmute yourself, David. Wait. Go ahead.
Okay, I was just noticing, and a lot of your imagery seems similar to an early 20th century American illustrator. Ben will know him well, Winsor McCay. Especially, you had these funny elongated feet and sort of military kind of figures that he had. And also, were you influenced at all by the Belgian Tintin cartoon series that's been going on for about 100 years?
Well, I know the name Winsor McCay, but I don't really remember his work. And if I see it, then I probably know it. With Tintin, well, I saw it much later, I think. And I think it's just that I was really inspired by this a bit old-fashioned imagery. Maybe this is the reason that it looks similar. But yeah, I really like Belgian scene, because also they are close to me kind of visually.
Thank you.
But it wasn't my favorite thing. But yeah.
Thank you.
There's a question from Christopher. Did you want to ask that question, Christopher? Or
should I read it?
Sure, you could read.
You said that you were looking into samizdat. It's something I'd like to look into more. Anything in particular you discovered, or what I should look into? Well, I think you know everything I know. In Russia, what's going on in Russia. I think you even know better than me. Samizdat is this Soviet self-publishing, underground self-publishing. So now we have, now in Russia, they call self-publishing samizdat, all self-publishing. So, so yeah, I mean, because of COVID, well, I wanted to go more to Russia to kind of see what's going on, because I'm in a really weird place. I live here, and I realize that I don't have enough information to know what's going on there. I have to go there to kind of to art book fairs to really see what's going on. So I hope that after COVID, I will be able to go there and to collect more. And also we had plans with Print Room to maybe publish something in English or Dutch, preferably I think in English, some of the zines that I already have. But yeah, I mean, hope to see you someday, Christopher, in Moscow.
Yeah, it'd be good to. Yeah, actually, it's interesting what you said, like about. Yeah, I've seen people using that, like the samizdat term, and but from just the way you said it, yeah, maybe it's a little bit more. Maybe it's been used even more than I realized. I kind of thought it was just like an occasional thing, and people giving a little, just a little wink to this Soviet history. But
yeah, maybe, yeah.
But maybe they are. Maybe it's become more. People are using it more than I realized. Yeah. But it is interesting that there's stuff going on now, and then there's also this other history.
Yeah, yeah, and also the use of some is that for me it's very political, but I also see that many of the zines that are produced now, they have this political or activist thought about behind them. So I kind of like calling it new samizdat.
Yeah, I like it too.
Question from
Joanna?
Joanna. Yeah, you can ask.
Hello. So I was just wondering, how do you find balancing teaching and working as an illustrator and artist? And also, do you find yourself correcting things that you weren't satisfied with as a student, as a younger person? And have you got any advice for students leaving school and entering the world of illustration?
I think teaching is really inspiring for me, especially before COVID. I really liked that, but I think this year I'm a bit exhausted by it because it's all online. It's very kind of this borders between just your personal time and work time and teaching. They are really kind of non-existent anymore. So it's been exhausting, but it's still very inspiring to talk to the students. But I always have this thing that I have this problem of showing my work to the students, and even with this talk I had this problem. Like it's something like it's really difficult to talk about my own work. And also I understand that, well, my experience was very different at times. Like I had more stable position, than I didn't have anything really. And I actually had a plan to go to teaching full-time because I had a lot of work, but I couldn't earn my living with it. And I really don't want to discourage the students and to use my bad experience to predict their situation. I think as a teacher, it's better to be optimistic because also all the students are different. And I think also luck and being at the right moment in the right place is unpredictable and is different for every person, for every artist. So as a teacher, I think I'm just trying to listen to them more and to answer their question and to see what they look for. And then it's my turn to kind of help them in that. I'm not really authoritarian teacher or anything because I've had a lot of those. And I think my main problem in teaching is just finding this balance and finding this other way of being a teacher than what I experienced. So I hope I have answered your question.
Yeah, you have. Thank you very much.
And question from Julian.
Are you aware of any online sources for buying both new and older samizdat? Well, with older samizdat, it's more difficult because I haven't found anything yet. Just online, for example, this magazine that I've mentioned, Aya, you can find PDFs online, like very high quality PDFs of all the issues that they had. And yeah, I found something else, but yeah, it's difficult to find all the samizdat. With newer, for example, Christopher has a little publishing house in Moscow, and you can buy, they ship internationally, right, Christopher?
Yes, that's correct.
It's called Sputnik Cat, right?
Yeah, Sputnik
I
Cat.
pronounced it correctly. Maybe you can just put the link into the chat, and then if Julian is interested, he can check it out. Yes.
So I'm curious, maybe Christopher, I don't know if you just happen to know the illustrator, Mikhail Zlatkovsky?
Mikhail Zukovsky? No.
Zlatkovsky, he's a graphic artist.
No, I don't.
Yeah, okay, yeah, just wondering. Yeah.
Is he Russian or?
Yeah, he's in Moscow.
I don't know. I think I haven't heard about him. I will check.
Yeah, he does a lot of political graphics, posters, and things.
Oh yeah, I've seen his work when I think I was still living in Ufa, something in the newspaper or somewhere. I can recognize his style.
Yeah.
So maybe more questions or?
Actually, I did have one more question. Oh.
So go ahead, sorry.
Thank you. I did have one more question. I had a look at the zine Strangers, All the Strangers. I know it was sold at the print room, and I was wondering if there were any left, perhaps, anywhere.
No, I think even I don't have any copies left, but Karin de Jong of Print Room, she wanted to kind of make a second edition. And she wanted to print more of them because, yeah, we ran out of copies very fast last time. So hopefully there will be another edition of this zine.
I hope so too.
Ben, maybe you have a question for me. Save me, please.
But what was the, how do you spell again the publication? Yeah,
yeah, I will write it in the chat. I will write it in Russian then, and maybe you can copy paste it.
Copy doesn't seem to work in the chat window.
Oh, okay. Okay. So maybe they also have it in English. Then I think it's written like this in English.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see what comes up here.
Maybe I can find this link that with PDFs now. Yeah, maybe it's a better idea.
Oh, actually, there's a Wikipedia entry for it.
Yes.
It says it was illegally prepared in the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
And published in Paris. Yeah.
Oh, I found a PDF package on academia. Edu. I don't know if it will work. I will just but you can see that it wasn't published in the USSR.
Yeah.
It's very kind of beautiful, very bright colors.
Are there any regional artists that you discovered in, well, anywhere in the world that people don't know about? Or do you think the illustration world and the comics world are becoming very international or completely?
Yeah, it is becoming. I think also because of the popularity of self-publishing, we had all these fairs, and we can see each other even now. They're online, but we still can participate. And I think it's a good thing because there are so many artists and so many stories that in Europe they didn't see because they're historically and naturally the attention was only on what's going in Europe. So it's nice to discover kind of this new stories and new images. And yeah, I really like it that I can see so many artists from around the world just sitting in Rotterdam. But yeah, in Rotterdam there is a community of foreign artists and illustrators. Many of them are teaching in the academies. Because, for example, in our academy, we should speak English when we do lessons, and when we just speak to each other, preferably, we should use English just for safety of international students, among other reasons. So, yeah, we have a lot of international academies, so there are a lot of interesting people working there from all over the world.
Anyway, people will look up more of your work online, and
Yeah.
get a deeper understanding of it, I think. So, any other questions or comments or complaints or anything?
I have a complaint.
What's that?
Because it's 1 o'clock.
Oh, right, it's late. I forgot. We don't have
Rotterdam.
to keep you that late.
No, I'm just joking. But it's a bit weird. I think my neighbor will appreciate me talking.
They can hear you?
Yeah, it's fine.
Oh.
She's very sensitive to sound.
Okay, we'll do the rest of the discussion with sign language or something. No, we'll see what happens. Okay, thank you for staying up so late.
Yes, thank you for inviting me.
Oh, my pleasure.
Thank you. Yeah,
and
nice, Masha.
We'll continue with other work next week. So come back if you like, or you can get on the, there's an email list. If you go to the Comics Symposium website, you can be notified These
Yeah.
great international. And the thing is now that before the pandemic, all of these events were in person, and we were limited to people who were passing through New York.
Yeah.
So now we have this complete worldwide, reach, and it's amazing.
Yeah.
I don't know if we'll go back. Oh, sometimes we do. The audience is all together in a room, and we bring somebody in on video from another part of the world. That works. That's sort of the hybrid model.
Yeah, I think in the academy we will stay hybrid.
Yeah. Yeah, well, but I mean, the whole audience comes in person. We don't put it online. You have to be there in person to watch the video. We've done that a few times, and it's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
So that's very different than Zoom, where everybody's disembodied. But
yeah, but I think you have a very nice program, very interesting, and maybe next time you can invite Christopher and he will tell you about new Russian samizdat.
I'll look up his publishing company. I don't know about that. But
it would be a nice talk. Yeah.
A lot to see and a lot to learn. Okay, thank you. And
thank you.
We'll
no, thanks.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for coming, or not coming, or staying home. And we'll see you next week. Take care.
Yes. Thank you all.
Bye-bye.